Next, on Currents News, Pope Francis has accepted his letter of resignation, but Brooklyn Auxiliary Bishop Octavio Cisneros isn't retiring. Another suspect under arrest in the brutal knife attack at Notre Dame Basilica in Nice. 2 of 3 victims now identified. And Election Day is almost here. We'll take a closer look at the issues facing Catholic voters in a special edition of Currents News right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. Pope Francis accepted the resignation of Auxiliary Bishop Octavio Cisneros. Canon law requires all bishops to submit their resignation at the age of 75, but Bishop Cisneros isn't retiring. Currents News' Jessica Easthope takes a look at his extraordinary life and priesthood.
All the other ones died, but this one remained.
Bishop Octavio Cisneros' time as an auxiliary bishop has come to an end.
Today it's still beautiful.
But his priesthood is in full bloom.
Glad that it, in a way, it symbolizes the life of my ministry.
When he came to the United States from Cuba at the age of 16, he was met with a new world that wasn't always so welcoming.
God took care of me. God led me through every step of my life.
We first made the announcement.
As a young priest, Bishop Cisneros was never afraid to adapt. With each new parish came a new culture and new opportunities to see faith through a different lens.
I became a Dominican, Ecuadorians, Mexicans, you know. Sometimes people ask me, "Where are you from, Bishop?" And I say, I'm from everywhere.
Bishop Cisneros will stay the pastor of Holy Child Jesus Church in Richmond Hill, where he lives and works with Father Christopher Henue. Father Henue says as his relationship with Bishop Cisneros strengthened, so did his faith.
I'm always thinking about what's coming next and what do I need to do next and what's going on in the parish next. And Bishop helps me to realize that it's all works in God's plan.
He's inspired parishioners in the same way and has been more than a religious leader. He's been a friend.
I slipped and fell and ended up in the emergency room. Who came to see me? Bishop Cisneros, to see how I was.
Though the words of his Episcopal motto, "Do not be afraid," have held different meanings over the years, they continue to ring true in his retirement.
At the end of the day, you cannot be afraid because God is with you.
Through the challenges and worries, God is with him. In Richmond Hill, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio personally thanked Bishop Cisneros for his years of service today. He says he is grateful Bishop Cisneros will continue to serve the Diocese of Brooklyn. The other big story, the church massacre in the French city of Nice. A second suspect has been arrested, believed to have been in contact with the attacker the night before what French authorities are calling an act of Islamist terrorism. The alleged attacker is a young Tunisian man armed with a knife and carrying a copy of the Quran when he mutilated the worshippers at the Notre Dame Basilica. 3 people were murdered, including a 60-year-old woman who has not been named. A 55-year-old man who worked at the church also died. French media identified him as Vincent Lequet, a devout Catholic and father of 2 who was opening the building when the attacker slit his throat. The third victim, a mother of 3 from Brazil who had lived in France for 30 years. After being stabbed, 44-year-old Simone Barreto Silva apparently ran to a nearby cafe. Her last words, "Tell my children that I love them." The terror attack prompted the French government to raise its security alert to the maximum level hours before a nationwide coronavirus lockdown. Turning now to the race for the White House. With just days to go, we're presenting you with some of the top political stories that cover the important issues for many Catholics. We'll also be joined by political science professor Brian Brown for analysis. The latest polling shows a vast majority of Catholic voters favor protections for religious freedom and share concerns about the pandemic, civil unrest, and race relations. But there are other areas where the faithful are divided, forcing many Catholics to make difficult decisions.
And I'm proud to be an American.
Faith is taking center stage in this year's race for the White House as Catholic voters in critical swing states get ready to cast their ballot. And though many already have, abortion and a myriad of other social concerns are top of mind.
It's not easy being a Catholic voter, especially when it comes to our modern day politics. Catholics really have to discern and decide what is the most important issue for them.
St. John's political science professor Brian Brown says Catholics need to make informed choices as the candidates make their final pitches on big issues like abortion.
I will always defend the sacred right to life.
The president's pro-life stance is unwavering, while Joe Biden is touting his commitment to other church teachings.
I grew up with Catholic social doctrine, which taught me that faith without works is dead.
Those differing positions continue to divide the Catholic vote, but the Senate battle over the Supreme Court's newest justice has put the rights of the unborn back on the front burner.
It is the preeminent issue.
Matthew Pinto, president of ASCENSION, a leading Catholic media company that works with thousands of parishes on adult faith formation, believes that the right to life is paramount.
Almost as if we can vote for the candidates after that issue is resolved. We can then look at the other 9 or 8 or 7 issues. But some are immutable.
Let us pray.
But not all Catholics agree, according to a Pew Research poll. 77% of Democratic-leaning Catholics think abortion should be legal in some form, while 63% of Republican-leaning Catholics think it should be illegal in most, if not all, cases. Another huge concern, especially among Hispanic Catholics, is immigration. 91% of Catholic Democrats oppose expanding the border wall, while 81% of Republicans favor expanding it. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops condemns the expansion plan. Healthcare, climate change, the death penalty, euthanasia, all pressing issues in this election, all pulling Catholics in different directions.
So there's many different factors because our faith is so dynamic and incorporates every aspect of the human person.
Catholics are united, however, over growing anti-Christian sentiment. According to a Real Clear opinion poll, 83% of likely Catholic voters are concerned about attacks on churches across the country in recent months. Brian Brown says that the most important thing is that you make your vote count.
Thank you, sir.
You have to vote.
Matthew Pinto adding a little extra food for thought.
If a Catholic is on the fence about what to do, think with the mind of Christ and think with the mind of the church. The church, human faults and all, was established by Christ to teach in his name. It is taught in his name for 2,000 years. At the end of the day, the church really does get it right on these big issues.
The Catholic vote for president has swung back and forth between parties over the years, experts predicting the same may be true for this election. But conscientious Catholic voters are facing a dilemma since neither candidate seems to fit the bill when it comes to the totality of Catholic social teaching. Can a Catholic in good conscience vote for a pro-abortion candidate like Joe Biden? That's the question many Catholics are asking themselves in the run-up to this year's election. But just as many are asking whether the same can be said for President Trump, whose stance on issues like the death penalty and immigration has raised concerns.
This is a moment, a classic moment of where we are called to discern carefully in conscience about what we should do.
That dilemma has Catholics split down the middle politically. 48% of registered Catholic voters describe themselves as Republican, while 47% identify as Democrats, according to Pew Research polling. Their views divided by race and ethnicity. So what's a conflicted Catholic voter to do? Experts like Chris Vogt think voting your conscience is key. Another is examining what's at the core of Catholic social teaching.
So Catholic social teaching comes from both Scripture and from the use of reason, and it's a set of principles that and values and proposals really about how the world should be that are meant to engage all people of goodwill.
Vogt says Catholics also need to dig deep on the reasons why they might vote for a particular candidate, because intention is essential to understanding the morality of an action. Explaining it this way.
So if I'm voting for Joe Biden because he supports abortion rights, that would be wrong from a Catholic point of view. However, If my intention is to protect other very important moral goods that Vice President Biden supports, for example, around migration or around addressing race issues or things like that, and I vote for him despite the fact that he is a very strong advocate for abortion rights, that's a very different thing. So intention matters.
A voter's moral obligation can make the choice extremely difficult, and although American bishops avoid telling Catholics how to vote, they do try to provide guidance. The USCCB writing, "It is essential for Catholics to be guided by a well-formed conscience that recognizes that all issues do not carry the same moral weight, and that the moral obligation to oppose policies promoting intrinsically evil acts has a special claim on our consciences and our actions." Brooklyn's Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio also weighing in, describing conscience as the prudential judgments we make after we have assessed moral issues, trying to understand, especially in social context, regardless of political parties, what is right and what is wrong.
The dilemma for Catholics who really support all of the Church's social teaching and also support the Church's position on life issues is that we don't really have a home in American political life.
A reality that makes clear some of the tough choices ahead for conscientious Catholic voters come Election Day. Like most voters, many Catholics have already made up their minds, but that hasn't stopped the candidates from targeting those few remaining persuadable Catholics in key battleground states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Florida, where more than 20% of adults are Catholic. Joining us now is Brian Brown. You saw him in our earlier report, political science professor with St. John's University. Hi, Brian.
Good to be with you.
Nice to have you. And so how do you think Catholics are voting on these important issues?
Well, I think the number one issue of this election is COVID-19. But it is interesting that so many other important Catholic issues come under that umbrella. Issues of life and death, health care, education, the dignity of work and the economy. So all these factors and issues play into what is going on in the Catholic voter's mind.
All right, so can you give us some analysis into the Catholic mindset?
I think it really depends on what kind of Catholic you're looking at. Certainly weekly Sunday going to Mass Catholics would vote differently than those who don't attend church services. White Catholics are skewing Republican. Hispanic Catholics tend to vote Democratic. There's differences between age as well with the youth vote and the potential that we'll have in this election. So you really got to drill down into the particulars, but we know Catholics are always swing voters because our faith is so dynamic and it touches so many important life issues.
Right. All right, Brian, you know, Bishop DiMarzio wrote about what it really means to vote your conscience a few weeks ago in the tablet. He also recently spoke about the role of church leaders. Let's listen in to what he had to say.
We're trying to guide people's conscience. We would interfere if we said we favor this candidate over another, or if we gave a voter guide comparing one to the other on particular issues. What we do is try to help people form their conscience so that they can understand the issues before them, and in their good conscience, which is formed by church teaching, make a decision about who might be the better candidate to lead the country.
What are your thoughts on the bishop's guidance?
Well, the bishop is right. I mean, there's a reason they don't endorse candidates. And for many voters, for many people of faith, you know, that hour a week they spend in a church, a mosque, or a temple, that's their best time of the week. So for voters of faith, they need to pray over this. They need to discern over it. They really need to consult faithful citizenship for the Catholic voters. But there's a lot to think about, but they have to cast an educated and informed vote.
Well, do you think there are some Catholics that won't even bother to vote because they're so conflicted?
I think there are some voters like that. Many of those voters in 2016 might have held their nose and voted for President Trump because of the potential of the Supreme Court. And look how that played out. This time around, it'll be interesting to see who shows up and how they vote.
All right, Brian, we'll see you a little bit later for more insight. But first, a quick break. When we come back, as you've heard, Catholics could be the deciding factor in this year's election. We'll take an in-depth look at how the candidates are courting Catholics in key battleground states. And we'll go beyond the Catholic vote to explore what role your religious identity plays when it comes to the political decisions you make. Stay with us.
Now you can help us put your faith in the news. The next time you capture a newsworthy event, send us your pictures or video. It's easy. Go to netny.tv/send us, and you may see your submission on Currents News.
Welcome back to this special edition of Currents News. The critical Catholic vote, once a reliable Democratic stronghold, but not anymore. That reality has the candidates targeting the few remaining undecided Catholics in key swing states. It seems that Catholic voters know how to pick a winner, whether Republican or Democrat. They've gotten it right almost every time since FDR. Dwight D. Eisenhower, the only exception.
They always seem to land on the winner when it comes to presidential elections.
This election, the Catholic vote is as important as ever, especially in pivotal swing states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, and Ohio, where Brian Brown, professor of political science at St. John's University, says the election is expected to be decided.
When it comes to swing states, especially states with a significant Catholic population like Pennsylvania or Ohio, they're always sought after voters when it comes to an election.
Catholics make up 23% of the electorate, the largest religious denomination in the country, according to Gallup analysis. But Catholics do not vote as a cohesive group, making their votes critical and up for grabs.
The Catholic vote today is so diverse, wonderfully diverse, as is the Catholic Church, but also so polarized that it's really hard to predict.
Gallup data shows that white Catholics who are active in the church and lapsed Catholics tend to vote Republican, while Hispanic Catholics lean Democratic. But as the Hispanic community continues to grow in key states like Florida, David Gibson, the director of the Center for Religion and Culture at Fordham University, is now seeing that vote becoming more fractured.
You can't lump all Catholics together. In Florida, you have Cuban exile emigres. You have more recent immigrants from other parts of Latin America. They have very different views, also very divided. So they can provide the real momentum that's either going to carry the state for Donald Trump or for Joe Biden.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death is also a factor, leading the presidential candidates to retool their strategies on abortion.
You will see the rhetoric get a little uglier, a little more extreme and intense. But I think when push comes to shove, this has always been a policy issue.
Amy Swearer with the Heritage Foundation, a D.C. think tank that helped assemble the list of potential Supreme Court nominees, thinks President Trump's pick will resonate with Catholics.
I think anything having to do with those individual liberties, I think is what's going to appeal most broadly to the largest number of people.
Both camps have fired up teams to go after the Catholic vote, but the candidates too are divided on a host of Catholic concerns. President Trump is solidly anti-abortion, which could attract single-issue Catholics, while Catholic candidate Joe Biden is not. On social issues like immigration, climate change, health care, and the death penalty, the Democrats' platform is more appealing to multi-issue voters.
It's really hard to make an informed decision. There's no perfect candidate. There's no perfect party. A lot of Catholics describe themselves as politically homeless. But hey, you also have to pull the lever for somebody. And so you have to make an informed decision.
Still to come on this special edition of Currents News, does your religious identity affect the way you vote? We'll look at how people's faith influences how they cast their ballots next. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Election 2020. Every presidential election since 2004 has included at least one Catholic candidate on a major party ticket. This year, it could affect the outcome more than in the past because religious voters of all faiths are expected to have a large impact on who wins the presidency.
My Catholic faith has helped me through the darkness.
Catholic voters and their religious identity is on the ballot this year, with Joe Biden only the fourth major party Catholic candidate in U.S. history. A win in November would make him the second Catholic to ever hold the nation's highest political office since JFK, something Chris Vogt, the chair of the Theology and Religious Studies Department at St. John's University, thinks could reinvigorate Catholics in this country.
As Catholics, we are called to be attentive to church teaching, but really it is in our conscience where God speaks to us and where we need to come to a decision about the person that we need to support in this election.
Religion can be central to a voter's identity, but studies conducted by the Pew Research Center show that Catholics, like many other religious groups, want a president who lives an ethical and moral life more than a president who shares their own religious beliefs. 62% of them saying it's very important, compared to just 14% for the latter. The faithful also view religious organizations as forces for good in society, but a majority, 62%, believe churches and other religious institutions should stay out of politics versus 37% who do not. And while the Catholic vote is critical, non-Christian faiths will play a role too. Rabbi Brad Hirschfield, head of the National Jewish Center for Learning and Leadership, thinks the Jewish vote will reflect the hard choices all voters have to make come November.
What I think we have at their best in each community are voters who are seeking to live their values as deeply as possible and to appreciate that a single value can be lived in politically diametrically opposed ways.
Those divisions resonate with non-Judeo-Christian faiths too, like Muslims, Buddhists, and Hindus, who make up 2 to 4% of the U.S. population, a tiny slice that could make a big difference. The candidate's own religious identity could also come into play. President Trump identifies as a Presbyterian but rarely attends services, while Joe Biden is a practicing Catholic at odds with the church on abortion. As for the VP candidates, Kamala Harris is a Baptist, but her mother was a practicing Hindu, diverse religious beliefs that could attract voters to the Biden camp. But Vice President Mike Pence has a strong evangelical following, a self-described born-again evangelical Catholic with strong ties to the Catholic cultural tradition and moral teachings of the church.
Catholics have consistently been about equally divided, certainly over the last 50 years or so, between Republicans and Democrats, each faithfully searching their conscience and coming to different political conclusions. That, to me, is a wonderful statement of how we can maintain the constitutionally sacred value of separation in church and state and the religiously integrated approach, which says faith and politics can inform each other.
All right, let's bring Brian Brown back into the conversation. So, Brian, how about the non-religious voters? Have the candidates focused on them at all?
Yes, I think so. As a country, we're losing our religion. About 20% of the population has no religious identity, and that's only growing. So I think what you've seen is candidates reach out to this broad electorate in a variety of different issues, but these voters tend to skew Democratic. They tend to be younger, and up until now, they tend to not be always active voters. So we'll see, given the high voter turnout thus far, what that means for 2020.
Interesting. Do you think Catholics will determine the outcome?
I think Catholic voters, they're the ultimate swing voters, so they will make a difference in a lot of these swing states, and ultimately that'll make a difference in the overall election.
All right, Brian Brown, St. John's University, thanks so much for your expertise. Always nice to chat with you.
Great to be with you.
And to you for watching this special edition of Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us, because we are putting your faith in the news. Get out and make your voice heard. Vote.